My parents ignored my urgent calls during a heart attack because my sister was freaking out over a spider. So I nuked their comfortable retirement and watched them scramble like roaches. What's good, Reddit? Grab your popcorn because this story has everything. Toxic parents, a parasitic sister, a heart attack, LOL, and revenge so cold it could freeze hell over. The whole thing happened 10 months ago. I'm Chris, 29 male, lead software engineer at a mid-sized tech company that got acquired last year. Made decent money from the buyout, enough to buy a house in a nice suburb, and not check my bank balance before ordering appetizers. My parents live about 20 minutes away in one of those cookie-cutter subdivisions. Dad's a retired bank manager. Mom's never worked a day in her life but runs the neighborhood book club, like she's the CEO of literature. They made solid middle-class money, but always lived right at the edge of their means. Then there's my sister Brielle, 25 years old and allergic to responsibility. Picture the most entitled princess you've ever met. Then imagine she had access to someone else's credit card for 7 years straight. She's the type of person who calls an Uber to go 2 blocks because walking might mess up her hair. Let me paint you a picture with 2 quick stories about Princess Brielle. Last Thanksgiving, she showed up 3 hours late to dinner because she needed to find the perfect outfit for photos. When she finally arrived, she took one look at Mom's turkey and announced she was doing keto now and couldn't eat carbs. Then she ordered $80 worth of DoorDash to the house, while the rest of us ate Mom's cooking. The kicker? She made Dad pay for it because her wellness budget was already maxed for the month. The second incident was about 3 years ago. Brielle borrowed Dad's car to go to some friend's wedding and came back with a massive dent in the passenger side, hit a pole while taking selfies in the parking lot. She started crying about how traumatic the experience was and how she couldn't handle the stress of dealing with insurance. Dad not only paid the $3,400 repair bill, but bought her a brand new Honda Civic 2 weeks later because the dented car had bad energy that was affecting her mental health. She totaled that car 6 months later, texting while driving. Now here's the part that'll really tick you off. I've been bankrolling this circus since I graduated college. It started innocent enough when I landed my first decent job, just helping with small stuff here and there. Can you help Jess with her phone bill this month? Could you spot her for groceries? But that garbage snowballed into full financial life support faster than I want to admit. Credit card payments, rent supplements, insurance, groceries, car payments, and whatever nonsense business venture she was convinced would make her TikTok famous this quarter. My buddy Martin from work has been watching this train wreck for years. He's one of those guys who calls you an idiot to your face when you need to hear it, which is why we're friends. Every time I'd mention another bailout, he'd give me this look like I was personally funding terrorism. Bro, you're not helping her. You're paying her to stay a child. But family's family, right? That's what I kept telling myself. The setup for this disaster started about 8 months ago when Brielle moved into this apartment in the trendy part of downtown. $1,800 a month for 700 square feet. Naturally, she could only afford about $600 of that. So guess who was covering the difference? The place was nice but came with the standard urban wildlife package. Spiders, occasional mouse, maybe a roach if you left food out. Normal city living stuff that any functional adult handles with a can of Raid and basic cleanliness. But not Princess Brielle. We'll get to that later. I should have seen the pattern forming. But I was focused on actual adult stuff, like the biggest client presentation of my career that was coming up. This wasn't just another sales pitch. Landing this contract would set me up for a promotion to senior engineer and basically guarantee I could retire before 40. I'd been working on this presentation for 2 months. I remember feeling confident that Tuesday morning. Like all the years of grinding were finally going to pay off big time. I was about to have the best and worst day of my life. The presentation was 1 p.m., 25 people packed in the conference room. 20 minutes in, walking through Q4 projections, something felt off. Lights seemed weirdly bright, tunnel vision at the edges. I figured it was adrenaline or crappy conference room ventilation. Then the chest pain hit, like someone reached into my ribcage and crushed my heart with a vice grip. Sharp, radiating pain that made it hard to breathe. I tried to push through because you don't show weakness in front of 25 executives, deciding whether to trust you with $500,000. I kept clicking slides, explaining our process, even as sweat dripped down my face and my voice shook. Pain got worse, radiating down my left arm. My knuckles went white, gripping the laser pointer. Last thing I remember was pointing at our projected ROI. Next thing, face down on the conference table, laptop still projecting slides across my unconscious body, while 25 VIPs stared in shock. Martin said I was out almost 90 seconds before someone called 911. Ambulance ride was sirens and paramedics asking questions I couldn't answer. Brain wrapped in cotton, scared out of my mind. I'm 29, work out 4 times a week, don't smoke. Heart attacks aren't supposed to happen to people like me. From the ER gurney, hooked up to more machines than mission control, I got my phone out with shaking hands. Called my parents. Voicemail. Called again. Voicemail. Texted. Heart attack. St. Mary's Hospital. Emergency surgery. Come now. Radio silence. Doctors threw around acute myocardial infarction and emergency cardiac catheterization. My coronary artery threw a blood clot, cut off oxygen to my heart. They needed to operate immediately, thread a wire through my leg up to my heart to clear the blockage. I kept trying my parents while they prepped me. The rational brain said they were busy, no signal. But this pit in my stomach had nothing to do with the heart attack, and everything to do with being the backup plan in my own family. 3 hours later, wheeling me toward the OR, my phone finally rang. Sedated but conscious enough to answer. Mom's voice, casual as weekend plans. "Oh, honey, we just saw your messages. We can't make it to the hospital right now. Brielle found a huge spider in her apartment, and she's having a complete meltdown. You know how terrified she is of bugs. We can't just abandon her when she's this fragile." A spider. A freaking spider had taken priority over their son's cardiac emergency. "We've called 3 exterminators, but none can come until tomorrow. She won't stop throwing up from anxiety." I tried to respond, but anesthesia was kicking in. The last thing I remember before going under was Mom explaining how they'd bought Brielle a hotel room because her apartment was contaminated and she couldn't stay there. I woke up in the cardiac ICU at 2:47 a.m. according to the wall clock. The surgery had gone well. My chest felt like I'd been hit by a truck carrying smaller trucks, but the doctor said I was lucky to be alive. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No family rushing to check on me. No flowers. No, "Thank God you're okay" texts. Just me, alone in a sterile room, processing the fact that my parents had chosen pest control over their son. The night nurse was this older woman named Anita. She came in around 3 a.m. to check my vitals and found me staring at the ceiling. "Can't sleep, baby?" she asked, adjusting one of my monitors. Families usually camp out in these chairs when someone's had surgery like this. "Where's yours?" I explained the situation as matter-of-factly as possible. Heart attack during presentation, emergency surgery, spider crisis. I tried to make it sound reasonable. Anita's expression shifted from sympathy to barely contained disgust. "Honey," she said, sitting down in the visitor chair, "I've seen families drive through hurricanes to get here. I've seen parents sleep in their cars for weeks because they couldn't afford hotels but refused to leave their child. I've seen people quit jobs and liquidate retirement accounts just to be here during recovery." She paused, making sure I was really listening through the medication haze. "What I've never seen in 20 years is someone choose an 8-legged bug over their child having heart surgery. That's not normal family behavior." She stayed with me for another hour, well past her shift change, talking about family and priorities and what it means to actually show up for people when it matters. When she finally left, I was alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of clarity. I'd spent my entire adult life funding Brielle's refusal to grow up, while my parents enabled every excuse she manufactured. Every crisis she created became my financial responsibility. Every tantrum she threw became their top priority. And now, when I needed them for the first time in my life, they'd chosen her spider trauma over my life or death emergency. That's when I decided to make some calls of my own. At 5 a.m., still wired on whatever they'd pumped into me during surgery, I called Tony. He's been my lawyer since college. More importantly, he'd met my family at work events over the years. He was one of the few people who understood exactly how messed up the whole dynamic was. "Tony, it's Chris. I need you to come to the hospital with some paperwork." "What happened? Are you all right?" "Heart attack. Emergency surgery. I'm stable, but I need to make some changes. Big changes." "Jesus, where's your family?" "That's exactly why I'm calling you." He showed up at 7:30 a.m. looking like he'd thrown on yesterday's clothes and driven straight over. He took one look at me hooked up to machines in the ICU, and his jaw tightened. I gave him the full story: presentation, heart attack, surgery, and the spider crisis that kept my family away while I was literally dying. "This explains so much," he said, pulling a chair up to my bed. "Remember your housewarming party 2 years ago?" I remembered. Brielle showed up in designer clothes, complained my drinks weren't craft enough, then had a meltdown when someone used her phone charger. My parents spent 30 minutes apologizing while secretly Venmoing her money for an Uber to a better party. "I watched your dad send her $200 just to make her stop crying," Tony continued. That was the pattern. Every family gathering became an opportunity for Brielle to create drama, and for my parents to throw money at it until she went away. Tony opened his briefcase and started pulling out documents. What exactly are we doing here? Everything. I want to burn it all down, with pleasure. Tony grinned. We spent 3 hours going through my financial situation. Tony brought his laptop, pulling up account statements, investment portfolios, property records, everything connecting me financially to my family. Nurses kept checking, probably wondering why I was conducting business meetings from a cardiac ICU bed. The joint savings account was the first bombshell. I'd set it up 2 years ago as an emergency fund my parents could access for serious situations. Medical bills, major home repairs, actual emergencies. Aging parents might need help, and I wanted them to have access without asking. What Tony found made my stomach drop. $28,400 in withdrawals over 2 years. All going to Brielle. $1,200 for emergency rent help in March. Actually a spa weekend with friends. $2,800 for car repairs in May. Down payment on jewelry. $4,600 for job training courses in July. $3,200 for therapy sessions in September. Weekend in Miami. Full account history going back 5 years. $125,000 total damage. I'd been paying my sister a $25,000 annual salary for being a professional victim, and I hadn't even known the full extent. The real nuclear option was the condo. I'd bought it with my acquisition windfall 18 months ago. A beautiful 2-bedroom place worth about $340,000. I'd put my parents as co-signers for tax purposes and emergency access, but legally, I owned it outright. This is going to devastate them, Tony said, reviewing property documents. They've been telling people they partly own this place. Your mom's been posting Facebook photos, like it's her vacation home. Good. Maybe they should have thought about that before choosing Team Spider. Tony was already drafting dissolution documents when my phone buzzed with a text from Martin. He'd witnessed the conference room collapse, and I'd filled him in on the family situation. How you holding up, man? Heard your parents finally showed up. I texted back. Nope. Still planning some changes. Need backup? Actually, yeah. Can you do some research for me? Already on it. Your sister's social media is a goldmine of evidence. Martin's timing was perfect. While Tony handled legal paperwork, Martin was conducting digital reconnaissance. Within 2 hours, he'd compiled a comprehensive report on Brielle's recent activities that painted a picture of mind-blowing narcissism and financial manipulation. He sent me screenshots with timestamps and amounts, a full documentary of parasitism in action. Her Instagram account was public, which was her first major tactical error. The posts from the week of my heart attack told a damning story. 2 days before my medical emergency, a photo of her new designer handbag with the caption, "Treating myself because I deserve beautiful things. Sometimes you have to invest in your happiness. Blessed, Bakshwar worth it." What she didn't mention was that my emergency fund had paid for her retail therapy session. The day of my heart attack, a full documentary series about her spider encounter. Not just one post, but an entire production spanning 8 hours. Videos of her crying, photos of the contaminated apartment, dramatic selfies with captions like, "When your safe space becomes your nightmare." She'd turned a common household arachnid into content and collected sympathy donations from followers. The day after my surgery, shopping documentation, new clothes, expensive dinners, nail appointments, all time-stamped while I was alone in the ICU fighting for my life. The total for that day alone was $1,800, based on the receipts she'd posted for social media points. But Martin's real discovery was her Venmo account. She'd made it public for attention, and it was a treasure trove of information about the family financial dynamic. You could track every dollar of manipulation in real time. Regular payments from my parents to her, always with cute descriptions. Rent fairy saves the day again, for $1,200. Car payment angel strikes, for $380. Grocery goddess provides sustenance, for $200, and so on. The recent transactions were even more revealing. I kid you not. Spider Trauma Recovery Fund, emergency hotel stay post-invasion, apartment supplies. She'd monetized her spider encounter into a $1,200 payday while I was having my chest cracked open. Martin said over FaceTime from the hospital hallway. She's literally profiting from the same crisis that kept your parents away from the hospital. Tony looked up from his legal documents. How public is all this? She's broadcasting everything for likes and donations. That's when I realized we weren't just changing my financial situation. We were about to expose years of manipulation and parasitism. My parents? They finally showed up on day 3 of my hospital stay. I'd been expecting them, but I wasn't prepared for the performance they put on. Mom swept into the ICU wearing an outfit that screamed, "I'm handling this crisis with style." Dad shuffled behind her looking uncomfortable, which was his default setting. "Oh, sweetie, you look so tired," Mom said, as if I'd pulled an all-nighter. "These hospital lights are terrible for your complexion." She started arranging gas station flowers she'd obviously grabbed on the way in, moving them around the windowsill. Dad stood awkwardly in the corner, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. "How are you feeling?" Dad asked. "Like I survived a heart attack with no family support," I replied. Mom's face tightened. "Christopher, don't be melodramatic. You know we would have been here if we could. Brielle was in genuine crisis. Over an arthropod. You know how she is about bugs. 25 years old and still being treated like a toddler. The enabling had reached clinical levels, and they were doubling down on it even now." Tony chose that moment to knock on the door. Perfect timing, as always. My parents' faces lit up when they saw Tony walk in. They'd always hoped we'd end up doing more business together, mostly because Tony made good money and could afford to subsidize their lifestyle if I ever decided to stop. They had no idea. "Tony, how thoughtful of you to visit Christopher," Mom gushed. Tony set his briefcase down. The sound echoed in the small ICU room. "Actually, I'm here in my professional capacity," he said, voice carrying that flat tone that meant someone was about to get comprehensively demolished. He handed me a thick folder. "These are documents I filed yesterday morning," I said, opening the folder slowly for dramatic effect. "I've made some changes to our family financial arrangements." The silence was absolute. I pulled out the first set of papers. "I've removed both of you from my will and revoked your status as emergency contacts and medical decision makers." Mom's face went white. Dad's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I've also closed the joint savings account and transferred all funds to my personal accounts. All $16,600 that remained after 5 years of Brielle withdrawals." "Christopher, you can't," Dad started. "There's more," I continued, pulling out the next stack. "I'm selling the condo and removing you as co-signers from all my properties." The room temperature seemed to drop 20 degrees. Mom actually staggered and had to grab the bed rail for support. "Huh? The condo?" she whispered. "But we own that." "You never owned anything. I bought it, I paid for it, and now I'm selling it. You were co-signers, not owners." Tony stepped forward with his own folder. "These documents detail 5 years of account activity. I think you'll find them educational." He handed them copies of the financial records Martin and I had compiled. $125,000 in withdrawals, all going to Brielle. Mom's hands shook as she flipped through pages of transactions. "This can't be right. These amounts are completely accurate." Dad was doing math in his head, and I could see the moment it hit him. "We didn't realize it was this much over time. You never asked. You just assumed I'd keep paying forever while you told your friends you were helping support your son." That's when I pulled out my phone and showed them Martin's screenshots of Brielle's circus. "While I was having emergency heart surgery," I said, scrolling through the images, "your daughter was shopping and running a crowdfunding campaign for her bug encounter." Mom started crying. "You're being cruel. We raised you better than this. You raised me to be your backup plan. There's a difference." Tony checked his watch. "The condo listing goes live tomorrow morning. We already have 2 serious inquiries based on the photos." "Son, please," Dad tried one last desperate pitch. "This will destroy us financially. Our standing in the neighborhood." Too late. The fallout from that hospital confrontation was immediate. Within 6 hours, I started getting calls from extended family members who'd heard some version of the story. Most were variations on the same guilt trip theme. I was being heartless, vindictive, ungrateful. Family first. Blood is thicker than water. The whole package. But my Uncle Josh had a different take. Josh is my dad's younger brother, and has never been afraid to call nonsense when he sees it. He'd been watching the Brielle circus for years with growing disgust. "About dang time," he said when he called that evening. "I've been waiting for you to wake up and smell the coffee for years." The kicker? Turns out Josh had been having his own issues with my parents' entitlement. They'd been hitting him up for loans to cover Brielle's expenses, always with sob stories about how I wasn't contributing enough to help my poor, struggling sister. They'd borrowed $8,400 from him over the past year, supposedly to help with my student loans and get me back on my feet, but he had suspected it was going straight to Princess Brielle. He wasn't just upset about the money, he was furious about being lied to and manipulated. As a small business owner, he had zero tolerance for parasites who lived off other people's labor. "I'm backing you 100% on this," he said, "and I want my money back from those lying sacks of garbage." The condo sale moved faster than even Tony had predicted. Listed Thursday morning, 3 offers by Friday afternoon. Sold by Sunday evening for $365,000. Cash deal, no contingencies, quick close. The buyers were a young couple. My parents tried calling 62 times the day the sale closed. Each missed call felt like a small victory, a boundary being enforced for the first time in my life. I didn't respond to any. Martin had been monitoring Brielle's social media throughout this entire process, documenting her response for posterity. Her reaction was expected. She'd gone private on Instagram after people started connecting the dots between her spider trauma fundraising and my heart surgery. But Martin had screenshots of everything before the lockdown. Her final public post was a masterpiece of playing victim. When toxic family members can't handle your growth journey, they try to destroy your support system. I'm choosing to protect my energy. Self-care, toxic family, boundaries, matter. The real entertainment started when her followers began responding with screenshots of her own Venmo history and Instagram stories that Martin had shared in the comments before she went private. But the bomb was still coming. My cousin Brad from my mom's side had been watching this whole drama unfold with amusement. Brad's a successful real estate agent who'd always thought my parents were pretentious jerks, but he'd stayed neutral for family peace and business reasons. The spider incident changed his perspective entirely. "Dude, I heard about the hospital thing," he called me a week after I got discharged. "That's absolutely messed up, even for them." He had access to something I'd forgotten about: my parents' social circle. They belonged to a country club where dad played golf twice a week and mom did charity committee work. Their entire social status was built on perception and keeping up appearances with people who had money. "Want to have some real fun?" Brad asked. "I'm playing golf with your dad's foursome next week. Time to spread some truth." "Dude, you don't have to." "Nah, I'm definitely going to have some fun." Brad's golf outing was a masterpiece. He didn't go in guns blazing, he was subtle. Just casual mentions of how worried he was about Uncle Robert and Aunt Caroline's financial situation, how challenging it must be to support an adult daughter. The country club gossip network is more efficient than the CIA. Within a week, everyone in their social circle knew the story in general. Successful son cuts off financial support after parents choose daughter's bug phobia over his heart surgery. Mom started getting concerned calls. "Oh, Caroline, I heard Christopher had some health issues." How terrifying that must have been for you. Followed by awkward silences when she tried to explain why they weren't at the hospital. Dad's golf buddies were even more brutal. "Robert, you missed your son's heart surgery for what now?" became the running joke in their group text. But wait until you hear this. My parents had always bragged about their investment property, the condo I'd bought, as proof of their financial success. They'd told people they were investing in real estate. When the sale went through and the truth came out, everyone realized they didn't own jack. No investments, no property, no diversified anything. Just decades of pretending to be more successful than they were. The country club has a minimum net worth requirement for membership. Turns out my parents had been skating by on their claimed real estate investments, and the assumption that their successful son would always back them up financially. When their membership came up for renewal, they couldn't demonstrate the required assets. Brad called me with updates. "Your mom got dropped from the charity committee," he reported. "Apparently, they need members who can meaningfully contribute to fundraising efforts. Your dad's been uninvited from the investor golf group." Brielle, meanwhile, had moved back in with my parents after getting evicted. 3 adults crammed into a house designed for empty nesters. Martin was still monitoring her social media occasionally. According to his reports, she'd gotten a job at a local boutique, her first real employment in 7 years. The Instagram posts were comedy gold, especially since everyone knew she was living in her childhood bedroom. That's when she decided to try the direct approach. I was at home on a Saturday, working on some code with Martin, when the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole and saw Brielle on my porch, shifting like a junkie waiting for a fix. She was dressed in what I assumed was her serious conversation outfit. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. "What do you want, Brielle?" "We need to talk," she said, trying to push past me into the house. I didn't move. "No, we don't. Christopher, this has gone far enough. You're being ridiculous." Martin appeared behind me, taking in the scene with obvious amusement. "Oh man, is this the spider trauma survivor?" Brielle's face flushed red. "Who the hell are you?" "I'm Martin," he said with a grin. "I've heard so much about you. You're like a legend at our office." "You can't just cut off your own family," Brielle screamed. "I'm your sister. You owe me." "I don't owe you anything," I replied. "Get a job and pay your own bills." "I have a job, but it doesn't pay enough to live on." Martin laughed. "Welcome to adulthood, princess. You don't understand. I have anxiety. I have trauma. I can't just work some minimum wage job like a normal person. You worked 11 days last year, I said. Then you quit because your manager asked you to show up on time. That manager was toxic. Martin was grinning. Dude, she's even worse than you described. This isn't funny. Brielle whirled on him. Also, this is a private family conversation. You need to leave. Actually, this is my house, I said. You need to leave. I'm not leaving until we figure this out. Mom and Dad are freaking out about money. Not my problem. Her eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what it's like to have real phobias. You know what's traumatic? I asked. Waking up alone in the ICU after emergency heart surgery. That's not fair. I needed them. Brielle, I was literally dying. Martin pulled out his phone. Should I call an exterminator? I'm worried there might be more spiders around here. I never asked for your help. Martin and I both started laughing. Dude, Martin said, I've seen the Venmo receipts. You literally had celebration posts every time money showed up. Rent Fairy saves the day. Remember that one? Screw you! Brielle turned back to me. Christopher, if you don't start helping again, I'm going to tell everyone what you're really like. I'll expose you. Expose me for what? Having a job? Paying my own bills? I'll tell them about how you were a loser in high school. How you never had any friends. Martin was grinning. Oh no, not the high school dirt. What's next? Are you going to tell his mom? I'll post everything on social media. I'll make sure everyone knows what a terrible person you are. Your followers already know what kind of person I am, I said. I'm the guy who funded your lifestyle for 5 years. They also know what kind of person you are. She was full on sobbing now. You're destroying our family. I'm ending our family's dysfunction. There's a difference. Mom and Dad are talking about divorce because of the financial stress. Maybe they should have thought about that before they chose your bug phobia over their son's cardiac emergency. Martin was recording now. This is going straight into the group chat. The guys are never going to believe this. Stop recording me! Brielle lunged for his phone, but Martin easily stepped back. I want my money back! Brielle screamed at me. All of it! You owe me. I owe you exactly nothing. You've taken $125,000 from me over 5 years. Brielle was completely unhinged now, pacing back and forth on my porch. This is all your fault. Everything that's happening is because of your selfishness. Brielle turned back to me one last time, her face a mess of tears and rage. You know what? Fine. But don't come crying to me when you're old and alone and you need family. Get off my property. Now. You'll regret this, she screamed as she stomped toward her car. The only thing I regret is waiting this long to do it. She slammed her car door and peeled out of my driveway. Martin was still recording. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what financial parasitism looks like when the host cuts off the supply. We went back inside, and Martin immediately started texting the video to our group chat. My recovery progressed perfectly. Follow-up appointments showed excellent healing, no complications, better cardiovascular health than I'd had in years. Stress really is a killer, and removing the constant anxiety about funding other people's poor choices had done wonders for my blood pressure. Work was great too. We eventually landed that contract. Turns out surviving a heart attack during a client presentation makes you memorable, and the executives were impressed by how I handled the aftermath. Got the promotion, salary bump, better stock options, everything I'd been working toward. The best part was the text I got from Uncle Josh 8 months later. Your parents asked me for another loan. I told them to go pound sand and ask their spider exterminator for money instead. Everything was good until 4 months ago, when the harassment escalated. My parents had decided that ignoring them wasn't working, so they switched to a more aggressive approach. Started with drive-bys past my house, slow cruising, parking across the street, taking photos. Then Brielle started showing up at my work. She'd sit in the lobby for hours, telling the receptionist she was my sister and needed to discuss a family emergency. When security asked her to leave, she'd cry about how I'd abandoned her during her. The final straw was when they showed up at my gym, all 3 of them, waiting by my car after my workout. Mom started crying the moment she saw me. Dad launched into a speech about forgiveness and family values, and Brielle stood there filming for her healing journey content. Christopher, we need to talk, Dad said, positioning himself between me and my car door. This has gone on long enough. Move, I said. We're your family. You can't just cut us off forever, over one misunderstanding. Stop! You chose a spider over your son's heart surgery. That's not fair and you know it, Mom sobbed. Brielle was genuinely traumatized. That's when I realized in their minds, they were still the victims. I was the unreasonable one. The spider crisis was still, 10 months later, Valid justification for abandoning their son. I called Tony the next morning and told him I need a restraining order against all three of them. I explained the escalating harassment, the workplace visits, the gym ambush. Tony was already drafting paperwork before I finished talking. The restraining orders were granted immediately. 500 feet minimum distance, no contact through third parties, no social media mentions. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Having them served was almost as satisfying as cutting off their money. The process server found Mom at her book club meeting, Dad on the golf course, and Brielle at work. 3 separate public humiliations, each perfectly timed for maximum social damage. Uncle Josh called me that evening, laughing so hard he could barely speak. Your dad got served restraining order papers right on the 14th green, in front of his whole foursome. One of the guys filmed it. Then 2 weeks later, I got a wedding invitation. My cousin Emily was getting married, and traditionally, the whole family would attend. This would be the first major family event since I'd gone nuclear, and the first time we'd all be in the same place since the restraining orders. I RSVP'd yes, obviously. I'm not hiding from these people. I showed up feeling great, ready to enjoy whatever show was about to unfold. Emily had obviously heard about the family drama, because she'd seated my parents at a table, as far from me as physically possible. Corner table by the kitchen doors, with the other family disappointments, divorced Uncle Gary, weird Aunt Susan who sells essential oils, and cousin Kevin who's 40 and still lives with his mom. Brielle was there too. She kept shooting me dirty looks across the room while posting Instagram stories about family love. Everything was going smoothly until the evening really kicked in around 9 p.m. I was talking to Brad and some cousins when I heard raised voices from across the room. Dad had apparently decided the festivities were the perfect opportunity for confronting his son. He started walking toward my table with obvious intent. Mom was trying to grab his arm, but he shook her off. Brielle was following behind with her phone out, obviously planning to film whatever content was about to happen. "Christopher!" Dad called out, loud enough for half the reception to hear. "We need to settle this like men." That was rich coming from him. The entire room went quiet. "Sir, you need to stay back," the security guard said, stepping between us. Dad said, trying to push past the guard, "I have a right to talk to my own son." "Actually, you don't," I said, pulling out my phone to show the restraining order. "You're legally required to stay 500 feet away from me." "This is nonsense," Brielle screeched, shoving her phone in my face while recording. "You can't just abandon your family. We raised you." That's when Mom lost it completely. Started wailing about how I was destroying the family and how she didn't raise me to be so cruel. The head security guard said firmly, "All 3 of you need to leave immediately." "We're not leaving," Dad shouted. "This is our family." "That's a man with a restraining order who wants you gone," the guard replied. "You can leave voluntarily, or we can call the police." The entire reception was watching this unfold like theater. Phones were coming out. People were whispering. "Fine!" Brielle screamed. "We'll leave. But everyone here should know what kind of person Christopher really is. He abandoned his family when we needed him most." "Actually," Uncle Josh called out from his table, "everyone here knows Christopher had a heart attack, and you chose to comfort your daughter through a spider sighting instead of visiting your dying son." The silence that followed was deafening. The murmurs started then. 200 people processing the fact that these parents had skipped their son's cardiac emergency for pest control. "You don't understand," Brielle shouted. "I have arachnophobia. It's a real phobia." "You're 25 years old," someone called out from the crowd. "Grow the hell up." That's when security stepped in hard. 3 guards, 1 for each of them, physically escorting them toward the exit. Dad was still trying to argue, Mom was crying hysterically, and Brielle was filming everything while screaming about family abuse and trauma responses. The head guard looked at me. "Do you want us to call the police?" "Nah," I said. "I think they've humiliated themselves enough for one evening." The doors closed behind them with a satisfying thud. The room was silent for about 10 seconds. Then someone started laughing. Then someone else. Within 30 seconds, the entire reception was dead laughing. The rest of the reception was amazing. People kept coming up to tell me they'd always thought my parents were entitled jerks, but hadn't felt comfortable saying it. Brad got the best footage of the whole thing. Dad being physically dragged out while shouting about family loyalty, Mom sobbing about how cruel I was being, and Brielle filming her own humiliation while screaming about trauma. He sent it to the family group chat with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong." The video made its way through our entire extended family within hours. By Monday morning, everyone in their social circle had seen them get physically removed from that wedding. I haven't heard from them since then. Until last month when I got a text from an unknown number. This is your sister. Can we talk? I blocked the number. Some bridges are meant to stay burned.